Here at another episode of Varsity House Podcast with your host, Sean Crawford. To my right, co-host Carl Jones. And then this episode, we're bringing in the one and only Brady Quinn, Fox Sports analyst, former Notre Dame quarterback, and first-round draft pick by the Cleveland Browns. Yes, I mean, we're here in Fort Lauderdale, State and Liberty. I mean, it's a beautiful spot. So
this is where anytime you see me on TV, I'm wearing State and Liberty gear. Like, it is the most comfortable. I don't even need stuff really altered outside of my pants because it's like more of an athletic fit, so it's tight, but it's stretchy. Like, I could probably run a marathon in that suit, even though I'd never want to do that actually. But like, they're that comfortable. So this is my spot, man. This is where I come and try to pick out a lot of my stuff, and it's awesome, especially for athletes. Like, like, it's hard to find suits, man. Like, we're built differently, and like, you want stuff to fit though, like it, and be comfortable, right? And that's especially when you're traveling like on a bus or a plane. So that's what I love about this stuff, man.
I mean, no, it all looks good. I was even talking to the guy. I know they have like an influencer program. So anyone out there who wants to, support some State and Liberty, make sure you sign up for the influencer program. But I was like, we had to come. I told Carl, I was like, we gotta come at least like buttoned up today. I mean, we're going against. We got Brady Quinn on the show. We gotta look professional.
It's just three Ohio guys. Yeah. That's all it is, man. Just three Ohio guys.
We gotta look good a little bit. Yeah, but I mean, that's actually funny. You talk about Ohio. So we were talking to just like offset, but like, what was it like growing up in Ohio, and like, how did that just get you to where you are today?
I mean, it's tough because I don't live there now, but all my family is back there. I love Ohio, man. I love repping like the homage t-shirts and like showing Ohio pride, especially down here. I give my wife a hard time about it because my eldest daughter, Sloan, she's almost 6. And she's like, it's too hot down here. I want to go back up to Ohio. And so I'll kind of nudge my wife a little bit because I loved my childhood. I love my upbringing. I love the people there. Like, I don't know if it's something in the water or it's just how people are raised. I think they treat people right. They treat people with respect. There's like a work ethic, there's values, there's all those things. And I think that state it breeds like excellence, like, sure. Well, we'll sit in movies and you'll hear they're like, they're referencing, oh, they're from Ohio, or they're like, and I'm always like, I literally nudge my wife every time. I'm like, see, again. And she gets so tired of it. But the reality is, like, to me, it set like a huge foundation because I mean, as much as your parents play an influence in how you're raised, and there's that nurture portion, there's also like the tribe, right? And there's like from your teachers to all the other coaches and people you had. And I feel like, to me, there's no better place for like football growing up, like the way it's taught, the way they teach you, and how it applies then to life later on.
Yeah, I got a friend who lives in Dublin right now.
Who?
Brandon Tiassum.
Okay.
And he was telling me, he was like, everyone from the town loves you. He's like you're their superstar, you're their hero. He said a kid told him that you could have played, if you had went to Notre Dame for safety, you would have been in best safety in Notre Dame history.
Wow.
So
I mean,
that's how much love they have for you there.
They're probably only saying that because, like, when I was throwing interception, and this started when I was young, like, I hated throwing interceptions. Like, that was probably one of my biggest issues. Like, even through my pro career, was like, talking about having short-term memory.
Right.
I hung on to that forever. I always would. And so I would, as soon as that ball left my hand, if I thought like a guy was going to get a jump on it, like, I was headhunting. I was like cutting through the line to go lay that dude out. And I remember the first time it happened when I was in Pee Wee football. And I remember, like, to this day, like, going after like Ray Lewis. Like, I remember I threw a pick in Baltimore. It looked like they were rolling the coverage. They didn't. I kind of threw blind. I couldn't see over my left tackle. And threw it, got picked off. And I remember just started running the sidelines, and the ball got pitched back to Ray. And I just like dove like low at the sideline, just try to, hit him in the hip, get him out of bounds. But like, I always was trying to hit someone if I threw a pick, man. But I don't know. Maybe they saw that one time.
Did you play any other positions growing up?
I played like all growing up. I was a quarterback, like DN, because I was like taller and lanky. And then I played more DB through junior high. And then when I got into high school, I was a little big enough to play like weak side linebacker. And then once my sophomore year, once I started playing a quarterback, like, that was it. We had a coaching change. My senior year, a guy named Mark Crabtree came in. Loved Coach Crabtree, and he was like, I'm platooning you. He's like, I'm not letting you play on the other side.
Right.
And it was tough because I felt like I could have added value there, but I understood what he was doing. And we had as much success in those 2 years as our school has ever had. So a lot of credit to him.
Yeah, I think they got a Dublin Coughlin's been in the news a little bit just because I think Abby Steiner.
Yeah,
She's
the
from there.
sprinter.
Yeah.
Dude, she can fly. I was, and the funny thing is so my baseball coach, Tim Saunders, we won a state championship my sophomore year there in D1. He's going into the Hall of Fame. He's going into a Hall of Fame. I forget exactly which one it is. Before, the job he's done coaching, I believe his son is dating Abby. Now, I could be wrong, but I'll just say big ups to the Saunders family for that, because those kids are gonna be fast.
Yeah, we gotta reach out to the Saunders family because Abby didn't get back to my DM, so maybe
try CJ.
Maybe we'll get him on there.
Now, talking about Dublin Coughlin, you were All-American there. Got a bunch of accolades, but being from Columbus and as an Ohio kid, if you're that guy in Ohio, staying upstate or staying in state, or you're going to that team up north, but you went to ND. How did that path kind of work?
It was a tough decision for me. In part, my dad's family, he went to Boulder for 2 years, then went to Vietnam and served as a Marine. During that time, his family moved to Columbus. And so his dad was in the greenhouse business. And so he came back to Ohio State, finished at Ohio State. And so there was like a decent amount of familiarity. And I grew up going to games there. And it was just one of those deals where I don't know if it was like too close to home to appreciate it. I was in Dublin. It's 20 minutes away from Ohio State's campus. I went to their football camp forever. But I don't know that I fully appreciated it really until the very end, meaning like before signing day. And, I had already committed to Notre Dame at that point, but that was the year they beat Miami, arguably the greatest college football team of all time. And they won a national championship. And I remember being like, man, that was probably like the only point in time where I kind of second guessed the decision to go to Notre Dame because of Jim Tressel. Loved Coach Tressel. I mean, he was the best. Such a good dude. Mm-hmm. Obviously, some of the other guys that I knew that I played against who were already on the team ahead of me, or the guys that I knew were going there from around the area, around the state that I met, great guys. And you kind of could feel they were going to be successful. But it didn't feel like it was the right fit for me. And I feel like that's hard to explain to people unless like you've been to Notre Dame, unless you went there. You kind of go, oh, okay, it's like very different. Like there's just a different feel from it. And academically, it's what I wanted. And spiritually was what I wanted. Like I don't open up and say that a bunch, but like I felt more of like a pulling to be there to develop like as a man spiritually too. And I thought that was the biggest differentiator between Ohio State or even Michigan, which I looked at really hard.
That's interesting because we were. I try to tell them all the time, and they're like, I'm a diehard Irish, and it's funny because like I didn't even grow up a Notre Dame fan. I grew up a Michigan fan.
Okay.
And also from Ohio, from Cleveland. It was like everyone's like, why didn't you go to Ohio State? Like, why didn't you look at Ohio State?
Yeah.
For me, it's like my dad was a Michigan fan, so I grew up just like maize and blue, like Mike Hart, Chad Henne, like those type of
you. That's like how young you are.
Like that,
those are dudes I played against, man.
Yeah, I'm like,
and they were younger than me, I think.
So I grew up watching them, and I was like, okay, that's like the squad, like Crable, and
that's my class.
Yeah, so
he had the skinniest legs, but he was jacked up.
Yeah, on top, right. And so like when it came to like recruiting, I didn't even take a visit to Ohio State just because I knew like. I was never going to go there. And it was
so how close was it for you between Michigan and Notre Dame then?
So I was committed to Michigan, and then I wasn't offered by Notre Dame yet.
Okay.
And so this was like this, I don't know if many people know the story, but I was in a conversation with him, and like Diaco was the DC during my junior year.
Okay.
And so he didn't recruit me because I was too short. He liked his DBs taller. Like the 2012, was it 2012? The national championship team?
Yeah, 2012.
Yeah. Well, they went to the national championship, but those were all like longer guys, and like Bennett Jackson and Kavari Russell, like those were like bigger guys. And so, I mean, it made sense. So like, whatever, I was committed to Michigan, played through my junior season, committed to Michigan, and then Diaco ended up leaving, and Van Gorder came in.
Yeah.
And then
BVG, man, that mustache.
That's my guy.
He just swooned you in there, didn't he?
Yeah. So then Coach Kelly called me, and then it was just sort of the recruiting thing was back on, and so I had a weekend where I was gonna go to both, and so I went to Michigan first, and then that next day I went to Notre Dame. And Notre Dame it killed it.
Yeah, it's different. I'm telling you, right. Like when people go there, and I think when families go there, it hits different. Like they realize it. But so here's my BVG story. So I am. It's my 7th season. I signed with the Seahawks, beginning of free agency. I'm out there with Russ. He's in his 2nd year. It's 2013, and like they had went to the playoffs the year before, and they're like need someone to kind of come in to back up Russ. I'm like, all right, great. Have a good preseason, all that. It was between me and Tavares Jackson, God rest his soul. But Darrell Bevel, the offensive coordinator, had more experience being with Tavares, so that was the first time I'd ever been cut, right? And so kind of tough conversation, but I immediately get a call from John Izek with the Jets. And so they kind of bring me in, and he's like explaining the story. He's like, look, Mark's hurt. Mark Sanchez is probably going to have to go on IR. He's going to get surgery. He goes, we got this young buck, Geno Smith is going to start. We need someone to kind of come in and help him kind of along, whatever. And he goes, it's not going to be for the full year. He goes, I don't know how long it's going to be for, but like, we've got an opportunity if you want. I said, well, let me sleep on it. I haven't been cut before. So next day I call and I go in. So that first week, it's when I get my introduction to BVG. And so this dude running around like a crazy man on the practice field, because as the backup, you're on scout team.
Right.
And we're trying to prepare for, I think it was Tampa week 1. And I just remember him blitzing all the time. It was like, there was just blitz after blitz after blitz. And you're on a scout team, so like you've got like the things drawn on it, and you can't like check the protection.
Right.
You can't audible out. Like there's no hot rail buildings. The receivers have no idea what they're doing. Completely built for like the defense to have success. And so like I remember looking at it, be like, no. Do this. We started changing stuff. He was getting ticked off.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
And so like by the end of the week, he's like, stop that. We're not doing that anymore. So that was it. But we had a good relationship because he ended up going to Notre Dame to end up calling their defense. And I went up there for like one of those fantasy camps. And so we're out there at Soldier Field because this is during the Notre Dame Stadium reconstruction. And, you've got all these older guys out there, putting the Notre Dame gear on. They're doing their deal. And so they're like, hey, go in and take a snap, for warm-ups, whatever, before we go out there. So what does BVG do? All out blitz, right? 999, whatever you end up calling. And so sure enough, like I get the ball, drop back, and I feel a guy who's going to come free. He like jumps up, puts his arms up, right? And I feel him like I throw it, and I feel him like fall to the side of me. And then I just hear him yelping, like crying, grabbing his knee. I'm like, oh God, what happened? Like what'd I do? The dude tore his ACL at a fantasy camp, all because BVG wouldn't have called all out blitz and warm-ups. But I said, I think it was Jim Russ who was still our trainer. Maybe it was Mike Bean who's been there forever.
I love Mike Bean.
But I said to him, I was like, hey man, they want the real experience. I was like, that happens. That ish happens.
No, so I mean, I definitely want to talk about the NFL and Notre Dame again, but definitely want to get into just the current topics right now as far as college football. I mean, the whole conference changing. Of course, Notre Dame's in the media now because it's like, do they join a conference? Do they stay out of it? All the media days are starting to happen. So, what's your take? What's has been your take on just all that going on right now?
I think it's their landscape is changing to really the haves and have-nots. I think what happened was during COVID when a lot of schools were hit financially, people started to like look at their bank accounts and look at their accounting books and going, okay, hold on a second. Like we need to reevaluate some things. And I think it kind of brought to light the disparity between the SEC, what will be this Big Ten TV rights deal, and then everywhere else in college football. And I think what happened from that is schools started to look for safe harbor. They stopped thinking about their affiliation to a conference. And I think they started thinking about like what's in their best interest for their student athletes and their university moving forward. And that's where I think you saw the movement of Oklahoma and Texas. Because if you recall, I mean, the Big 12 had to swoo Oklahoma and Texas to stay the first time around. Like this isn't the first time like they had potentially left the Big 12. So, that once that happened, I think it planted that seed in other teams' heads about, okay, maybe we need to look into this too. And for like USC and UCLA, I think it comes out of left field for a lot of people because they're like, hold on, these like two LA West Coast schools. What are they doing in the Big Ten? I mean, if you're the Big Ten, I mean, it expands your geographic footprint. You've got 25,000 alum from the Ohio State University out in California alone, just in California. So think about how excited that fan base is. Right. And now you're able to enter into a TV window that didn't exist for you. I told you guys before we came on and started filming this, the noon Eastern window is the most watched window in college football, at least according to last year and the way the trends have been going. So if that's the case, and you're on Pacific time, like you're not playing home games at 9 a.m. Eastern, right? So you got to find ways of getting into those games, and the way you get into them is now being a part of the Big Ten. So it has to do with, to me, I think a number of things, but most importantly, how much money they're able to get from these TV rights deals, and then the stability when it comes to how they're going to be impacted for, playing for national championships and this conference realignment. And I don't know that we're going to see much more. I mean, that's just my guess, but I would say this. I mean, I don't know that it's done. I don't think we're going to see as much movement as everyone else thinks we're going to see.
What is your thoughts on like the health of the sport going forward? Because you talked about the haves and the have-nots, and I'm from Syracuse, and
right.
we obviously don't have the same football background as an ND or even a USC.
Right.
And I feel like it's becoming like more of a national versus a regional sport.
100%.
I live in upstate New York now,
right.
and the passion for football is not even close to where it was back in Ohio, let alone the SEC. I guess what is your thoughts on just like the health of the sport going forward? Because as a kid, it was such a national sport, and now it's becoming more regionalized, I guess.
See, I would actually argue the opposite. I think it's a regional sport, and it's becoming more nationalized. And I think you're seeing that with different brands that resonate. And honestly, when you look at it, there's only so many windows you can be in, right? If you're going to be on national television, on whatever network has the rights for you. Whether you're Fox or ESPN, you have noon, you have 3:30, you have 7 p.m., 7:30, whatever, that time actually ends up kicking, and then that 10 p.m. late one. But your three biggest windows are that noon, 3:30, 7 p.m., which is very similar to the NFL scheduling, right? How the NFL has become the most watched sport in the entire country. Well, college football is the second most watched sport, and those windows are setting up or stacking up very similarly. So the hard part about making it more national is you could only make it more national for a handful of teams because you only have so many TV windows to deal with.
Right.
So there's going to be some teams left out, and that's like the unfortunate part about realignment and where things are going. But in the end, I do think it'll be greater exposure and better for college football. It's only going to highlight student athletes more and help them become more household names. I think you look at, other sports and the way they prepare those guys to be household names coming into the draft. I think you see a fair amount of that in college football, but I think the kids that you see go, like Zion Williamson, right? He goes to Duke, and then he like just not even like the full year, like the shoe exploding, the dunks, everything else. Like he only played 1 year there, and you're like, you knew who that dude was when he was coming to the NBA. I think to a degree there's some of that, but like, maybe Bryce Young because he won the Heisman, but like, do people know how good CJ Stroud is? Do people know how good the kid down here, Tyler Van Dyke, is a quarterback for Miami, or Will Levis at Kentucky? Like the guys who are probably going to be first-round picks, top 10 picks, top 20 picks next year's draft. Like, I don't know. And so I think it'll elevate the top, 1-2% who are going to be going to the NFL. But yeah, there's definitely going to be some programs and teams that are going to be hurt by this.
What do you think about the whole bowl game stuff now? So it's and specifically the Rose Bowl. Like, how will that shape up with the conferences like moving the way they are now?
Yeah, I think that's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out. To be honest with you, I've never really understood why we can't expand the playoff and incorporate the New Year's Six as part of that, right? I mean, if you think about it, you've got 6 New Year's Six games or bowl games that rotate right now for 2 semifinal spots, right? Because the national championship game is bid for whatever city bids on that, right?
Right.
So you've got 6 of those games to work with. I mean, if you wanted to expand, I mean, theoretically, you could make that happen. You could create a playoff format where you incorporate all 6 of the New Year's Six into the expansion of whatever that playoff looks like.
Right.
Whether you go to 12 teams or 16 teams or 32. I mean, the whole concept of a playoff to me and why Division I college football in particular, FBS can't do it doesn't make any sense to me. You do it at other levels and you make it work. Why not make it work in college football now? I don't know that there's enough parties that want to make that happen. I think the TV portion of it too, and how expensive those rights are, probably isn't worth it right now either. And so it's just about bringing it all together. But until the conference realignment has settled, which I do think it has, I'm not sure we're going to get much more of a clear picture on the playoff scenario either, though. But as far as the bowls go, like I'm more of an advocate for expansion because I think it makes them more meaningful. And I think it will force players, like, for example, Kenny Pickett, who I loved, right? Had a great final year at Pitt. Johnny United's Golden Arm Award winner, goes to Pittsburgh. So, like, happy for the guy and all that. Didn't play his bowl game. And I'm like, man, it was a New Year's Six. Like, I could have not imagined of sitting out of a New Year's Six game and like looking at you guys if we played together and saying like, yeah, I'm not going to go compete with you today. Like, I don't care. I get there's business decisions to be made and all that, but go get insurance on it and go play. You know, I just that hurt and stung to see that. And I think the only way you remove that from even being a possibility is you make the game more meaningful by incorporating it as part of the playoff. And so if you expand it, you incorporate that.
What would you say to someone like a Jalen Smith though, who is in a similar situation? He played in the bowl game and got hurt. I do think that if there was, because we were talking like if it could one day be like the AFC NFC, I think that'd be really cool and like have like the NFL type of playoff. Like I think everyone would end up playing.
I think everyone's looking at like Big Ten, SEC forming that.
Yeah.
I think the tough thing is with that is you're talking about huge major markets for like the TV media rights deals and 32 teams.
Right.
And so do we get to that where we only have 32 college football teams that are playing for it? Like, I don't know if I want that necessarily, only because I still think you get those like Cinderella teams and stories that can compete, and that David Goliath that like, yeah, maybe 9 times out of 10 they won't win, but that one time they might, and that's why we play those games. Like, Gonzaga is now a powerhouse in college basketball. We didn't used to view them that way. When I was growing up, they weren't they weren't getting a 1 seed. They were a Cinderella story. Now we view them as like a national powerhouse where a 5-star like Jalen Suggs will go there, right?
Yeah.
They didn't used to be the case. So like, I don't know that you'll see that consistently happen in college football, but I do think if you expand, you'll give more teams an opportunity to kind of build up their brand and say, hey, we played in the playoff last year. We played for a national championship last year. So I don't know. That's just kind of my 2 cents on it.
Yeah.
It's funny as a kid, though, because like the Fiesta Bowl that you played in and all these other like BCS games that they were back then, like those are the games you look forward to. Now, I couldn't tell you who played in any of the New Year's Six outside of the playoff. And
right.
I guess the only way of once we introduce the playoff, you open up the can of worms and you can't really,
can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. No.
So like the only way you can fix this is by expanding it. Because I know as a kid, Fiesta, Sugar,
right.
Rose Bowl, you got your little
Orange
rotation.
Bowl.
You watching all of those. Now I couldn't.
Yeah, I think it's I'm on the Orange Bowl committee and it's obviously great in a year like last year where you get to host a semifinal game.
Right.
Like, I mean, you see the enthusiasm, you see how special it is, like the meaningfulness behind it. And I played in the Fiesta, played in the Sugar, and so I can only imagine what it would be like to have that playoff scenario where all those games are meaningful like that. And that's why I'm like a big advocate for it, because I don't think we need to like change this model so much where like we're even saying, oh, we need to have home games. It's like, no, just figure out a model where you can incorporate these bowl games as part of it. They already have the infrastructure built out to host these teams and have them play off for it. Just figure out how to make it work.
Yeah.
But again, I think there's too many people right now at the negotiation table have their own prerogatives kind of set out. And, whether it's the bowls individually or the conferences, all those things, it's not as easy to put together as you think.
Mm-hmm. Do you think Indy has to make a move?
I don't think they have to make a move right now. I think they've got a couple years to see how the landscape shakes out. Meaning, you have a Big Ten rights media deal that's going to be up here soon. So not only one where are you going to see what you'd be making as a Big Ten team, but you also see who's not going to be a part of that from the TV rights perspective. So let's just say, in hypothetical speaking, Fox and ESPN are part of it. Well, then you have NBC Sports, who currently has your rights, but they don't have any other college football. CBS Sports, who gave up their SEC package, doesn't have any other college football. They might be saying then, okay, now let's start negotiating with Notre Dame for those home game rights. And that's where you're able to get compensated well for those rights, whatever they end up being, instead of joining a conference. Now, that also assumes that you can still be a part of the college football playoff. It assumes that your penalty to leave your affiliation in the ACC isn't too high. Mm-hmm. And then, outside of that, it assumes that that's the TV partner you want to be with. And that's the direction that you want to go. And from a scheduling standpoint, can you still put together the national schedule you always have? I still think you could. I just think it comes down to, looking at the Big Ten and what they've constructed is now you've got USC and UCLA. Now you've got a lot of those Big Ten teams. Like when I went, we played Michigan every year. We played Michigan State every year. We played Purdue every year. We played USC every year. And they still do now, but those other Big Ten matchups they don't have.
Right.
And so like that to me, those schedules to me were a lot tougher. And
I love the Big Ten games versus the ACC games.
Yeah.
But I mean, except the Clemson one. But other than that, it's
Well,
fun.
yeah. I mean, look, because Clemson's good though, but like that's what you want.
Right.
So my whole thing is, I think they're going to have something to think about in 2 years because of the amount of money Big Ten teams are going to be making, and then the national schedule now that they're going to be able to put together with adding USC and UCLA, and that's going to be, I think, tempting for Notre Dame to say, okay, this might make sense now for us, and especially for all the other sports too. Considering regionally how you're all right there, and you think about the expenses that you save on not having to fly down to the coast, Atlantic coast, Miami, and be able to bus places and whatnot. Yeah.
You just talked about the traveling and stuff, and I only bring this up because your wife, she was a gymnast.
Yeah.
And so for a sport like gymnastics or a soccer, like not football or basketball, do you think it'll be hard for them, for like a school like Penn State, to travel all the way to USC and then maybe have to come home and then go back to UCLA or something like that, as far as like gymnastics, softball, like those type of sports?
Yeah, I think what they're going to do with scheduling to help out is, limit the amount of times that USC and UCLA have to go all the way to the East Coast, right? And then when they do, probably make it where they're hitting a bunch of stops, and so they're there maybe for like a week or two, whatever it is, to allow them to kind of get that out of the way and then come back home, right? Almost like what you see in professional sports. I think that's what's going to happen with some of the scheduling. But no, I mean, look, I think it goes both ways. Like if you're a West Coast team like USC or UCLA, are you going to be ready to play a noon game in a big time spot when it's 9 a.m. your time
in November,
right? In that cold weather?
Yeah.
But then on the flip side, like, are you going to be ready to play a 7 p.m. kick Pacific time? That's 10 p.m. in your internal clock for you. It's going to feel late as hell. Right. So I think it goes both ways, but I think the Big Ten will be cognizant of that and then try to have the players' best interest in mind. Honestly, if I was like USC or UCLA and not knowing like if there will be any more expansion or anything else, I would like have a hub, like whether it's Indianapolis or somewhere else, like you find a spot where you can access and utilize those facilities for all your teams, regardless of what time of year. So we're like, you're centrally located in the Midwest for a minute so that you can get to the place you need to go compete. Maybe that limits some of your costs. Maybe it doesn't, but maybe it makes travel a little easier.
That's definitely an interesting take. So you got ACC or Big 12 Media Days coming up.
Yeah.
Give us a little insight on that conference. I feel like that's a conference that's not talked about much, especially because you got Lincoln Riley leaving. We got the news of OU or Oklahoma and Texas leaving. So I thought it was great football at the end of the year, to where it was Baylor, they were competing, Oklahoma State was competing. You got OU, of course, and then Texas is always back. So we got to talk about Texas. But
they always feel back, right?
Yeah.
Are they back? I mean, do you guys think they're back?
They got the talent.
They got Arch Manning coming eventually, and Quinn Ewers is there.
They got the names for sure. They got the pub, and they got so I think they got the hype. They always got the hype coming.
There's always some dude going hook 'em, and like somewhere Matthew McConaughey there's like all right, hook 'em.
But talk about that conference a little bit, because I feel like we always talk about the Big Ten, we always talk about the SEC, and then ACC a little bit, but I feel like we don't talk about the Big 12 enough. So give a little insight on that.
Yeah, I think it's tough because of, they've got a lot of changes going on right now. They just changed the commissioner, Bob Bowlesby stepping down. And then you got, was it Brett Yorkham, I think his name? I forget how you pronounce his last name, but he's stepping into that role now. And you look at what he's thrusted into. You get OU and Texas leaving. He knew that walking in the door. But then now you've got this landscape changing with who knows what's going to happen with Pac-12. And so if you're the Big 12 conference, what stops you from wanting to help those teams in the West Coast get into that, at least central time zone, right? Get into some of those earlier games and being a part of it. And it kind of helps strengthen that group of teams, because when you lose two big brands like Oklahoma and Texas, it kills you. I mean, I'll put it this way, and I don't know the exact figures for the Big 12 and what they'll lose or what the value will be after Oklahoma and Texas leave, but I saw a figure that Pac-12 teams would have been paid roughly about $45 million, something like that, per team. With USC and UCLA, and without them, it's like $30 million. So you've got that big of a drop-off with just two teams who are going to be leaving in the future. I can only imagine it's about the same, if not worse, for the Big 12.
Right.
And so maybe you look at trying to expand and bring on some of those other bigger brands that are left, whether it's Oregon, Washington, whoever, to help strengthen at least the Baylors, the Oklahoma States, the Texas Techs, the TCUs, the rest of what you have there, Kansas State, Kansas, at least within that conference. And maybe that makes sense to kind of combat what you're seeing elsewhere. It seems like it's hard to know where the Big 12 is going to go. Going back down there, it was only a 10-team conference to begin with. I know they've added some teams since then, but again, you're looking at trying to kind of strengthen them with quality brands. At least that's what TV partners want, right? And that's what this is all about. It's all about money and like what income you can derive with the type of brands you can put on television for them.
Now, with the will you be going out with the Fox crew?
It won't be our crew. It will be me and a few other people who will represent Fox down there. Yeah.
Got you. Definitely want to talk about that crew though. The Fox noon kickoff and everything there. You're with they're legends to me. You're a legend yourself, but Matt Leinart, you were Reggie Bush, was with Urban, and now like Bob Stoops. So just talk about that crew a little bit. We'll definitely get into that whole Bush push game and just both your times, Notre Dame, USC, those battles. So, but just talk about that crew and like what's it like going to work with them like every week.
In the beginning, we had familiarity because we had played against each other and all that. And I think the crazy thing about TV and like shows like that is you don't know if there'll be chemistry. Like you don't know if it's really going to work. And after the first year, we had a blast. I mean, we really did. And now it feels like family. Like you go out and like you kind of know what to expect, and you kind of know like little jokes and little things you can play. Like you're all brothers up there. I mean, I say this every single week. Reggie to me is one of the funniest people I've ever been around because there are always moments where I'm like, I did not think he was going to say that. Like it could be on TV, off TV, whatever it is. But naturally, like he's just a funny guy. The way he sees the world, the way he like laughs at certain things or like stuff like we'll be just kind of sitting back, waiting for a highlight or something to happen, and he'll be looking at something funny on his phone, or we're like be showing each other something funny on our phones. Like it's just a funny dude. And Matt and I obviously have been close ever since. I mean, very similar in nature just because we're both quarterbacks, so we see a lot of things eye to eye, and like we're always trying to like kind of help either whatever's happened behind the scenes or whatever's going to happen on camera. Like we kind of know where we need to go if like one of the coaches ever gets off on a tangent or Reggie gets off on a tangent, like we can kind of help get the conversation back in the right direction. So no, those guys are great, man. They're like brothers, honestly. And working with Coach Meyer back when he was with us was great. With Coach Stoops, different but great. Like he's two Ohio guys, just good, solid coaches and people and experience. So it's been a blast. Like I say this, man, I've never worked a day in my life. Like it's a blessing to be a part of it. And I hope like for you guys, I mean, obviously you guys get to, watch, like it's fun, man. I mean, it is so much fun to be a part of. And I hope like the fans and the people who are there are having fun too.
Yeah. The Michigan and Ohio State game was really fun.
Yeah.
The one this past year.
Of course. And that was,
yeah, that was.
Here's the crazy thing about that. So we were up there. Maybe it was my first time being up there. And like, it was like a running joke. Every time Charles Woodson would come on with us, like Michigan would lose for a while. So we were like, hey, we need to do a Michigan game just so it's like a cupcake, like find like a MAC opponent they're taking on just so we get Charles a win. But when we went this past year, it was crazy because in previous years, we had been there and it was like, when Ohio State took the field, it was like, oh, Ohio State just took the field. Like you could feel the entire stadium, like 100,000 people were like, oh no. Like this year, it was like, all right, bring it. Like there was none of that. I mean, even the fans, but like the energy, the feeling between like everyone out there, between like Aiden and David Ajabo and like all these dudes, like you just saw the demeanor and the players was so different. And it's weird because as like a player, I don't know if I would have ever like recognized that.
Right.
But now like being a step away from it and like maybe being like a dad and like seeing body language different, like I could see and feel it. And I was like, oh, like this is going to be a different ball game now. And then it started snowing and I was like, oh, now it's really going to be a different ball game. Like, cause if Ohio State can't throw it, they hadn't been able to run the football that great and their defense couldn't stop the run and they had a lot of issues. And sure enough, that's exactly how the game went down.
Man, I wish I
would have knew that going in. No, but listen to how you're talking about the atmosphere, like from, I guess, in the booth now. I guess what is some of your favorite atmospheres in the booth and also as a player, because it's two different perspectives.
100%.
When you got the helmet on, people yelling at you, yelling expletives and stuff, but then on the other side, you get to appreciate like everything that's going on.
Oh man, that's the thing is it's so different now because like you go in away games and you're like, hey man, like us against the world type feeling. Like I love going to Ann Arbor. I only got to start there once, but I remember our freshman year we got beat real good. And game day was there, and then every single workout we had that entire off season, it's like coming back. That next year was like all geared towards Michigan. Like that's all we cared about going into my sophomore year. It's probably why we lost to BYU and Provo. Like we didn't even prepare for like their scheme. They were on a 3-3-5 and our linemen were like, what the hell's going on? Like, don't worry, Michigan's next week. But I mean, honestly, like that environment, the big house, man, there's nothing like it. Their fans, East Lansing's like that. I always felt like Michigan State was just nasty. They just had like
Michigan State,
they just have a nasty fan base though. Like even going back for like Michigan State this year, like their fans can just turn, like they can get nasty quick, man. So I don't know. I mean, those environments are great. Wisconsin, another like sneaky fun place to go. The whole jump around.
Someone did their like the top 5 atmospheres, and I saw the jump around was on like number 1 on someone's list.
That's for sure up there. Oklahoma, Texas is pretty neat at the Cotton Bowl because you don't see that environment where they like divide it like at the 50. It's like, Texas one side, Oklahoma the other side. You don't get to see that very often. That was a really, really neat atmosphere and just different environment to be at. That was a cool one. Iowa's cool, like where they do like there's like one row's black, other row's yellow, and then like you've got the whole wave and all that, which is just it's such a neat deal. But it's Iowa City, man. That's all that's there, and how excited that fan base is. We get to go to Happy Valley this year. We haven't been to Penn State, so it's not going to be a whiteout because it's going to be a noon game, which I know there's some people who are upset about it. But the reality is, I mean, it's still you got Ohio State coming to your place at home. So I don't even know if I should say that. I'm not sure that's actually public yet, but.
Hey, well, I love breaking news. So,
there you go.
No, when I was talking about the game day thing, and like Iowa has Iowa State at home this year. Oklahoma, Nebraska's getting going again.
We'll be at that one. I don't know if that's announced, but we'll be at that one.
Oh yeah, hopefully I'm at that one too. But
come on, man. I mean, again, at some point, I need to get my cell phone number. Like we were talking about this before the show.
Yeah. I'm all about.
Are you like too young to even be a millennial? Are you like the next generation?
Yeah, we're not millennials, bro. We like Gen Z.
I'm Gen
You're
Z.
Gen Z?
I'm Gen Z.
Wow.
But the crazy thing is like. I'm like too old for TikTok though. I'm at that stage where it's like I'm one of those people who are like, yo, TikTok's like stupid. Like that's for kids. Like I'm too mature for TikTok, but I'm like Instagram, Twitter, like that's me.
So I'm a millennial technically, but I do not identify with millennials. I'm like the next generation up. So like I look at all social media, I'm like, what the hell are people doing? Like I don't see the upside. I'm like, you're gonna make an ass of yourself and get fired or have some bad situation because someone talks smack, some nerd talks smack to you. That's what I feel like social media's become. It's like nerds being able to like talk smack to players that like they never really could in person, so they just do it on a keyboard. And it's like, man, if you were ever in person, you would not be saying that to someone. They
probably asked for an autograph or something like that. But I think that's like also the unique thing about social media, because there's that end of it, and then there's also the end of where you can monetize it. You can really create a brand, and like a player like Chase Claypool, to where
for sure.
What he does on TikTok, he said it got him his Jordan deal just because of how relatable he was, and they liked his personality and all those things that they saw from his TikToks. And so I think there's definitely two sides to it. Like I've been having to like dive into social media more as far as like the TikTok end, just because of the podcast, and everyone's like, you gotta post TikTok. That's where like you grow first on TikTok. And I'm
then
like,
you gotta dance. Can you dance? Can you dance?
It was like at the end of my college career where the TikTok came in, and like you got these freshmen coming in, dancing in the locker room, doing these things. And I'm like, yo, let's just go to practice. Like, why are we dancing before practice? But
you're an old soul. That's what you are, man.
Yeah, like you're a little bit. But so I'm trying to break that a little bit and just get into TikTok and then like social media. So I will get your number. I mean, that's pretty much how that's pretty much how I communicate. But I was telling
that's the running joke is like, we were trying to communicate before this, and I was like, you never asked for my cell, which is weird.
It didn't even dawn on me. It didn't even dawn on me.
It was like all social media. I was like, what is happening right now?
It didn't even dawn on me to where it was like, yeah, I should probably get his number. But it was just like the Instagrams were flowing, and as long as they flow, it's like, all right, I don't need the number.
Yeah, that's crazy to me. But again, I told you, like, the Facebook. That was my last year at Notre Dame. That's what came out. And we were like, I do not want my parents knowing where I'm at. You know, like, I do not want to post photos of what I did over the weekend. I like to keep that private.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that we just got on this Notre Dame topic. I think everyone I talked to I told them that we were having you on, and they were like, oh, I'm so jealous, just because a lot of my friends are Notre Dame fans and saw you as, like, we were talking about, like, all the players that we saw growing up. Those are like our idols. Like, we see them as legend, and like you were the Notre Dame legend, golden arm, you know. And so recruited by Tyrone Willingham.
Yeah,
and then tough 2 years, first 2 years, and then Charlie comes in. But also I wanted to ask you, when Urban, it was between Urban and Charlie.
Yeah. Yep.
Have you ever talked to Urban about not taking that job?
Yeah. Well, yeah, we've had our conversations. I'll kind of, yeah. So, I mean, the funny thing about that is, obviously I went to Notre Dame to play for Tyrone Willingham, and I was really like between Ohio State and Michigan at that point. And then my receiver, the Ndukwe, Chinedu Ndukwe, and his dad, Steven, they came to our house. And they're like, you got to go up and meet Coach Willingham. Because that was like from that Bob Davie who did recruit me. And I was going up there for an official visits. And then they had the George O'Leary debacle, and then they go to Tyrone Willingham. So it was a little late in the recruiting period for me. But once I went up and met with him, sat with him, talked, I was like, man, I want to play with this man. Like, he was the most honest and truthful with me of anyone throughout the entire process. Didn't guarantee me a thing or like give me any like talk like that. He was just like, I'll give you a chance to compete. And I was like, man, this dude's telling me the truth, because everyone else is saying other things. And I don't believe that for 1 second, because if they're saying it to me, they're probably saying it to someone else. So, you know, the kind of academics, football, spiritual part, like that all like sold me on it. But as you mentioned, like, first couple of years was tough. I mean, I played in every single game from my true freshman year, Washington State, 2003, you know, they're on, and started my fourth game from then on. And, you know, when I look back and I think about the first 2 years, and I look at what the last 2 years were like, it was like, well, like, I needed more time to develop and like manage it all. You know, back then we couldn't enroll early. That would have been more helpful to kind of get a better grasp and hold of the academic rigors that come with Notre Dame. And then even just to be able to redshirt and like kind of grow and develop to know the system, to know the teams, your opponents you're playing, all that stuff. All that was tough my first year. I think I was like 4-5 as a starter as a freshman. You know, turned the football over too much, you know, struggled with decision making. You know, we as a football team weren't great, and we were young, which you saw the fruits of that later on when Charlie got there. Because even our second year, we kind of flipped the script a little bit. Like, we upset a top 10 Michigan, we upset, you know, a top 10 Tennessee down in Knoxville. And then we lost some teams we shouldn't have and had a lead in the end. So you kind of saw like both the good and the bad. And then like our junior, senior year, we started to take off. But you know, yeah, that transition when Coach Willingham got fired, there was a group of us around our athletic director, Kevin White, and it was like a leadership council. And I had known Coach Meyer from when he was at BG, because he recruited me there. And so at this point, he's out of Utah now. And so I knew one of the radio guys, Ian Fitzsimmons, and I called up Ian Fitzsimmons. Like, Ian, I was like, you got Coach Meyer's number? He's like, yeah, pass me along. So I hit up Coach Meyer.
You were this active as a player.
Oh, I was like this active as a player. Dude, so I hit up Coach Meyer, didn't pick up, hit him up again, he picks up. And so we start talking. I'm like, hey, Coach, I was like, look, we got a young team, but we're like right on the cusp of this. We're going to break out. I'm telling you, you know, this, and that. And he was like, yeah, you know, he's like, but you know, there's a lot of things to take into consideration on this. I really appreciate you calling, you know, really respect that. You know, best of luck, keep in touch. I'll let you know what ends up happening. Obviously, he takes the Florida job. And so the interesting thing about that was, and because he said this at one point, because, you know, he went down there, they didn't have as good of a season as we did that next year.
Right.
We went to the Fiesta Bowl. I mean, we were, a push away from knocking off USC, and we were going to be playing Texas in the national championship game. And so like I remember he in studio one time he made a comment. I was just like, hold on a second. I was like, you didn't go to a BCS game that year. I was like, we did. I was like, maybe, who knows how it would have worked out if you would have came there. But he did win it the following year. He beat Ohio State that year, who we obviously lost to in that Fiesta Bowl. And you could tell like that team, the way Troy played that bowl game and the way the next year was going to go, like you knew they were going to be one of the top teams. But
that was one late hit away from Michigan going. The Crable hit.
Yeah,
they had him. Yeah. I was hurt as a kid.
1 and 2. I was happy. Related.
That hurt me as a kid. But so talking about those 2 years, like when Charlie gets there, I mean, the team was rolling. I think I read that you beat 3 teams on the road that year.
Yeah, and because we opened up with, we were at Pitt, it was top 25. We were at Michigan, it was top 10. We were at, trying to think who week 3 was that year.
Was that the year of the BYU loss?
No. No, we beat the crap out of them my junior year.
I wish I got to play BYU. I feel like that was always like a good rival between Notre Dame and BYU.
Yeah, no, it was. I mean, when we went out there to Provo, like I said, like we should have focused more on their scheme and what they were doing. We didn't. We were preparing for Michigan. That was my sophomore year when we ended up dropping the game then. But they're always tough. I mean, look, you're playing against dudes who are a lot older than you. I mean, there's some of that. And obviously, like, they got some players, man. Yeah. They got some players. But I can't remember exactly who we played our third game that year.
But we get to the Bush Push game. Yeah. And I didn't realize this, but like just doing some research that it was that big of a game.
Yeah.
Like pregame to where you had the pep rally in the stadium.
Yeah.
And it was covered on ESPN News.
Yeah.
And Coach Weiss brought former players back to talk to the team. He even brought Rudy back. So
he brought Rudy back. Rudy.
So what was that like pregame? Like, because I've had some great pep rallies and things like that, but like to imagine having it in a stadium and then televised on ESPN News has to be wild.
It was. I mean, and I'm trying to think what win we came off of, because I know we lost in like an overtime game to Michigan State earlier, and I just remember we were down big in that game. And at one point, like Charlie looked at me on the sidelines. He just goes, "Hey, you and me are the only people who think we're gonna come back and win this thing," because we were down like definitely double digits, maybe 3 scores, and so we ended up tying it up. We go into overtime. We ended up losing in overtime, but. I remember that next day he brought me in. He's like, we're going to have a shot. He's like, if you just, you keep playing, you keep doing what you're doing. He's like, these guys are starting to believe. They're starting to believe what they're capable of. And I think we beat the crap out of Purdue in like a night game. And then there was like USC maybe after that or something like that. So that week, and you know how it is. Like you play on Saturday, right? Mm-hmm. You kind of get back, you get your lift, your film and all that stuff on a Sunday. Well, Monday's your off day. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are your typical practice days. Like I remember walking out of practice Tuesday and it was like people were already in town. Like it was already that sort of vibe. And you could feel it. Like campus felt different. Like the students, when you walk by, it felt a little different. Like they had a different little pep in their step and like walked to them. We had like the Dylan Pep rally out on the South Quad. And I was shocked. Like I walked up to speak for a minute before I think I was going to like something later on that night, but it was packed. I mean, you're talking about thousands of people. And I was like, this is nuts. And then they told us they had to move. I forget when it might have been Friday earlier in the day. They're like, hey, we have to have a pep rally in the stadium because there's so many people in town for this. It's going to be televised. I'm like, what? I was like, what do you mean? They're like, no, you don't understand. The stadium's going to be halfway full. And so literally we walk in and it's like one end to one end, all on what used to be like the only press box side before they build up both sides, like top to bottom all the way. And I just remember being like, this is unbelievable. Like I'd never seen, obviously the Joy Center was like cool, but that was just a different experience. And so, we had so many people talk honestly before that game. Like I can't even remember, but then it was, the biggest surprise was like the green jerseys, which Coach Weiss knew about that tradition, which we weren't really aware of until we got back into the locker room after warmups. And I just remember being like, all right, like it's on. Yeah. Like we liked our game plan. We liked how the game kind of started and how it was going. And the one thing that I just look back on is like 2 things stood out. So back then we didn't have a replay. The opposing team would decide. So the Pac-12 in that case, or maybe it was actually probably the Pac-10, they decided, and Pete Carroll decided not to have replay, which it comes into play later on. The other thing was Coach Weiss. He told me that week. He goes, "You're going to score the game-winning touchdown on this play." And it was a quarterback draw, and he goes, "Because the last team that has the ball is going to win." So he said those two things to me, and sure enough, we kind of start our 2-minute drive. I got absolutely crushed on. It was like we knew like they couldn't stop like the old line concept or like double slants. You know, we just called it was called tosser in his system. They couldn't stop it. Like, so we just boom, boom. Well, the next one, like someone jumped up, someone was in the pass lane, so I started to scramble out. I don't know who hit me, but I swear to God, I was looking through my like ear hole. Like, I flipped it to Jeff on the sidelines, but like, so no one's gonna follow what happens after that. I got crushed, and I remember like I'm looking through my ear hole and I'm like fixing my helmet, and they're trying to call a 2-minute drive. But at that point, we're starting to kind of move quick, so we didn't want to leave too much time on the clock, but we also needed to score because we were down by I think 5 or something like that. So we get down, and I think we're around the 5 or 4 or something like that. And sure enough, he calls the play, and I just remember thinking to myself, like, all right, like we'll see it. I remember thinking in my head like what he said to me, and sure enough, I dropped back and I was like, oh, I've got the lane, like I'm gonna get this. And I think it was Keith Rivers who grabbed me, and it was close. Like I reached out to extend the ball across the goal line, and it was close. And honestly, like I've never seen an angle to go back and replay, but how we have replay, they might have called me short, which means we're on the 1-inch line, we're eating up more clock. And then now all of a sudden you think about how that plays into their next drive. They probably don't have enough time to come back. So that decision by Pete Carroll not to have replay might have been the biggest impact on the game, because not only did it impact obviously the amount of time that they had left in their 2-minute drive, but even that 2-minute drive, like the whole final series of like the play before the bush push, Matt was scrambling to his left, he fumbled.
Right.
Ball went out. I mean, clock should have kept running like it did, and then went to zeros, so people started rushing the field.
I saw that, and then they moved the ball to the 1-yard line, right?
They moved it up, which I'm like, how do you gain yards?
It was on a 7, like, or it was on a 4 or something.
It was like on the 4.
And then they put the time back on the clock, and then they moved the ball up to the 1.
You can't fumble forward.
No, and then on top of that was I mean, they were obviously Pac-12 officials, I believe, but they it was like they huddled together so much it gave those guys time to kind of have a timeout and like coordinate. And I mean, the bush push was the bush push. Like it's a play where I've always said to them, like I'd hope like Darius Walker or Travis Thomas would have pushed me like that, or Julius Jones or Ryan Grant would have pushed me in if I couldn't get in on my own, right? Like you do what you can to win in that instance. But look, they were a great team. I mean, that was the closest thing they got to losing, I think. I don't know if they lost they obviously beat us my freshman sophomore year, but I think they won back-to-back national championships. I know they won in 04.
Like a 37-game win streak.
Right. So it's like that was the closest maybe they came to losing at that point, until the national championship game that year.